Today we're here with one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs, from mining to politics. He's been at the heart of some of the country's biggest projects. Clive Palmer, thank you for coming on.
It's great to be here. What a great country we've got.
You're running a political party, you've got mining operations, you've got resorts that are beautiful.
This country's been good to me. I've got more than I need.
Didn't you have a near-death experience on that?
I had a I'll tell you about my near-death
Did that
experience.
change your perspective on life, Clive?
Well, it does, because you think you've got to make good use of the time you've got. That's why I'm coming on this podcast. And they said, Mr. Palmer, I think you've got 5 hours left to live.
Are you spending $100 million on the Trumpets of Patriots
Well,
party?
we probably will be around that money.
Why do people hate you?
Because I tell the truth. I'm an Australian. I live in this country. I love this country. And I thought, everybody's fed up with the Tweedledum and Tweedledee, dumber and dumber.
But you've gone from millions to tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then billions.
Numbers for me is like goals kicking the football.
Like a sport?
And I am highly skilled at making money. Although I haven't been an Olympic diver. But
We can get you in the pool. I'd love to take you diving. You lost tens of millions from the government because they just destroyed it.
actually, it gets better than that.
I heard you got a private jet basically for free. How did you pull that off?
Well, it was just using your best abilities. We've got to throw out these politicians. They've done enough damage to our country. If you look at what the people tell you at the election campaign, they never do anything. The point about it is, it's all bullshit.
Now, before we get into the episode, Diving Deep is about talking to high performers on what they do and how they do it. We've spoken to business leaders, political leaders, artists, Olympic athletes, and world champions. And it comes from a place of education and learning. I want to learn from these top people in the country. In the lead up to the election, because it's culturally relevant, I've spoken to a few politicians, including the leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton, the Energy and Climate Change Minister for Labor, Chris Bowen, and an independent, Zali Steggall. And today, Clive Palmer from the Trumpet of Patriots. Now, Clive, I'm also interested in the business success. He's built an empire, the way he's done it through mining and real estate, and now moving into politics. I'm curious to see the person behind the decisions. Now, for full transparency, we've never been paid for a podcast episode, period. I paid for my own flights and food to go and film this episode. They let us stay for free at the Palmer Resort, which is closed to the public for renovations, and it was convenient because we had all of our equipment, and that's where we were filming the episode. I believe in listening to everyone and forming your own judgment. So without further ado, here is our interview with Clive Palmer.
Today we're here with one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs, from mining to politics. He's been at the heart of some of the country's biggest projects. Clive Palmer, thank you for coming on.
It's great to be here. What a great country we've got.
We certainly do. I've been representing it for a long
time. The best
time.
in the world, right?
Love it here. Love to travel, love to come home.
That's good.
Now, we were having the chat before. You were saying student debt is a big issue for you.
Well, I went to my daughter's graduation recently and at Sydney University, and there was 500 students there and only 20 came from Australia. And I thought, that's strange. And the Vice-Chancellor announced he was going to Beijing for another 500. So in the 1,020 odd students, there's only 20 Australians. And I thought, well, for years and years, Australian generations have built up that asset. We shouldn't be giving it away to a foreign government. And I thought, well, how can we solve it? How can we get more Australians participating in our system? I thought, well, if we double the price on overseas students, we can make education free for all Australians, like it was when I did my degree in university and when Albanese did his, that's what we can do. Because, if you're 22 and you've just graduated, you don't want to be stuck with a $100,000 debt. And that zaps the energy out of our most promising people. And then I thought about all the people that have got HECS debt, that got student loans, and they may be 40, 35, they may have kids to support. They can't get a home because of these debts. And they're holding them back in life. And it's just not fair. We've got to wipe those debts and help those people. We have 130,000 Australians homeless at the moment, 10,000 homeless last month. We've got 3.7 million Australians having trouble feeding their families. Yet the government doesn't talk about it. The two talking heads you see on the debates don't say anything because they don't know.
And you gave $5 million recently to the food banks.
I did. That's equivalent to 10 million meals to feed hungry Australians. And all we need is the top 10 richest in Australia to do the same thing, and we'll feed all the hungry people. We just need the government to put in $200 million like they should accept responsibility for the hunger in this country, instead of paying $600 million for a rugby league team in Papua New Guinea. In short, we need politicians that care about our country, care about our people, and that's what we haven't got. But we're facing some terrible problems. We've got $1 trillion of debt.
What is your plan to solve $1 trillion of debt in the country? What would you do?
Well, back in the 1960s, before you were born, we didn't think we had much iron ore in this country. We had a licensing fee on our iron ore when we exported. Today, China takes just on 80% of our iron ore, and with that, they dominate the markets in manufacturing in Europe, the Americas, and they have a $5 trillion export industry. But if they didn't have our iron ore, they couldn't do it. So let's put a licensing fee on our iron ore, let that pay off our debt, and it's much better to have the Chinese paying it off than having you paying it off, isn't it?
Certainly. And when you say a licensing fee, because I know that at the moment we dig up the iron ore, we give it to the Chinese, they manufacture it into products that we then buy back at a higher cost, like iron.
Well, we do, but they sell it they dominate the economy by using that. China is the world's first superpower manufacturer. And what that means is that if you take the next 9 in manufacturing and add it together, it still doesn't get to China.
Is that right?
That's right. And the whole point about they do that because they've got our iron ore. If they didn't have our iron, they couldn't do it. So, we need a little bit of that $500 trillion that they're bringing in manufacturing.
And what would that look like, putting a royalty on it? How would that work from a business perspective?
Well, what it does is that over a 15-year period, you'd amortise it and it would pay off Australia's debt and we wouldn't have any debt. Then the politicians wouldn't worry about it. Then you wouldn't need to get these silly old treasurers that never done anything come and say, oh, we've got deficits as far as you can see out to the next 10 years, deficit, debt. What does that mean? That's an excuse for us to do nothing. But they haven't done nothing. They just keep coming up with excuses to do nothing, like our housing crisis. You know how hard it is for young people to get a home, but it's not just young people. It's hard for anyone to get a home,
Certainly.
And the solution to that's just so easy. It's easy peasy for someone like me that's been in business for a long time.
What would be your solution to the housing policy?
Well, we look at what the Japanese did in Tokyo and Yokohama. They built a fast train 120 kilometres from the city where land was cheaper, where they could bring down the cost of housing by 50%. It cost them about $200 million each, and it paid for itself because people wanted to get the CBD in 20 minutes. We'd have young families that could have a backyard and a home. They could afford it. But then again, we'd just go to our super. Now, I just come back from Perth where I was with a young couple who are living in their car with 3 children. And he's 28 years old, right? He's got about $110,000 in super because he's been working in the mine since he left university, right? But he's got to live in a car. He can't get access to that money till he's 65. Nearly 10% or 20% of Australians will be dead by their 65. They'll never get access to their super, right? So if you're an adult, why shouldn't he get access to super now for a deposit on a home or a contribution in his life, right? Why should his children have to suffer in homelessness just to give some management fees to some Liberal and Labor politicians who are director of the super funds? I mean, he's an adult. It's his money. Why can't it help him when he was in that crisis? So straight away, we would unlock the restrictions on super. It's your money. It should be there to support you in your life. Not all the challenges come in old age. We have challenges at all different times of our life. My first wife passed away at 53, unfortunately. But she never made it to 65. But I loved her dearly, and a lot of people are in the same situation. So we'll unlock the super and let it be available for a deposit on your home or for anything else you need in life. So that's the first point. The second point, in the United States, under the Roosevelt administration, they sent out Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac, and they were 2 large corporations that could borrow money for housing, and only for housing, and lend it out. So the government borrowing rate might be 2%. They could lend it out at 3%, and that's still a lot lower than the banks, right? And they're still making a profit on it.
Because banks are at 6 at the moment.
That's right. So why shouldn't we allow people to use the benefit of the government? Because the government, it's a ridiculous proposition, I know.
Why doesn't the government do it?
The government's supposed to be there to serve you, A public service, there's no reward for real public service. History's your only reward. And I'm an Australian. I live in this country. I love this country. My wife's Australian. My children are Australian. I care about what's going on. And I thought, everybody's fed up with the Tweedledum and Tweedledee, Dumber and Dumber, B1 or B2, however you want to look at it. They're fed up with them. So that's why we've got the Trumpet of Patriots at this election. And that's why we've got Sue Ellen as our candidate for Prime Minister. And she's here today with us. Sue Ellen, come over.
Shall we have a chat to her?
Right?
Welcome in.
She's going to be the next Prime Minister. She's standing for the Hunter. We've got 100.
Is that Hunter and Newey?
Hunter in New South Wales, yeah.
Newcastle,
Newcastle, yeah. And she's going to shake him out.
Yeah, Dad lives up there. And that's I love it there.
It's a great place, and it's built on coal.
It is. My pop was a coal miner. He worked down there, and he loved it. They paid him well. He looked after him.
Well, the whole community's into coal. And, of course, the Liberal and Labors want net zero. Net zero means net zero jobs, net zero future. So how smart is it? How intelligent is it to vote for a party, the National Party or the Labor Party, that both want to abolish coal? They're saying, we want to get rid of your community. Vote for us. And all the Novocastrians are saying, yeah, that sounds good. So we're going to end up with a lot of 50-year-old Uber drivers and KFC attendants, you know?
With the coal, though, if we ban exports of coal, countries still need this. So they'll just buy it from elsewhere. And I've heard Australia has some of the higher coal in the world, which actually makes the emissions less. So why would we push to ban it if it's still in high demand?
Oh, basically because we'll push the green agenda, regardless of whether it's in Australia's interest or not. So that a lot of manufacturers of renewable energy can make a lot of money out of it. Like you're right, in Indonesia, it's 3,000 calorific value. In Newcastle, it's 6,000, which means you need twice as much dirty coal if you're getting a coal from Indonesia from Australia. So if you really cared about the environment, you'd want to get the cleanest coal in the world. And we know that there's 750 coal-fired power stations under construction in India, another 400 in China. They're not waiting around, but Australians are paying more and more for energy. Did you know that the government subsidised renewable energy by $39 billion of your money? And did you know to get to net zero, it's $642 billion. So they can keep you poor and the politicians can control where you live, what you do. That sort of control. I just believe in our country and I believe in the younger people of our country that we've got a better future. And we should be encouraging them and encouraging industry. How will we do it? How will we get the country moving? Well, of course, ever since Federation, Australia hasn't had enough capital. We haven't had enough money. We had to import capital. But today, we're the second largest holder of superannuation in the world, nearly 5 trillion funds. And what do we do with that? We get Kevin Rudd in Washington holding a seminar.
Saying to invested overseas.
And most of our super goes overseas. It doesn't go to our country, but it'll help us. And of course, the government gives you a big tax break on your super. So it should be invested here. And that will turbocharge our economy. Get rid of this, I don't know what you call Bowen's ideologically. He'll go in the election anyway. But we've got to do this for our country. This is our opportunity. Everyone said we don't have an alternative. We've got to vote Liberal or Labor, right? Peter Dutton said, well, if I'm elected Prime Minister, I'll make sure Kevin Rudd stays our ambassador. Well, that's good because he's Labor. We know Dutton's Labor too, right? We know Albanese's Liberal, right? We know they both love each other, right? And, I was asked when Albanese became Prime Minister what I thought of him, right? And it was one of the radio stations that rang me up. And I don't like to talk about people when I actually think of them personally. And I said that to the radio station. And they said, well, Mr. Palmer, how do you judge Mr. Albanese if you don't like to talk about what he is? I said, well, I normally take notice of people who know him longer and better than I do. And they said, in Mr. Albanese's case, who was that? I told them it was his wife. They said, what did she think of him? I said, she divorced him. So that's the sort of Labor guys you get. Alba has to run around and wear very tight pants and go to a rock festival and think you'll get the youth vote. Well, at the same time, he's ripping them off and not giving them an adequate opportunity in education. So we've got to throw out these politicians. They've done enough damage to our country. It's time for a new day, isn't it, Sue Ellen?
It absolutely sure is. And Sam, you made a really important point about the resources sector. If we want to build a future in our nation, then that is the thing that's paying for our hospitals, our schools, Medicare roads, and it's the thing that's going to help the 120,000 homeless that desperately need a roof over their heads. So the resources sector is going to be our future. We can't walk away from that.
No, we still need the iron ore to build the windmills, for steel for manufacturing. And if coal's still in high demand and people are going to buy it and we have high quality coal, but you're talking about energy, Clive. What's your thoughts on nuclear power?
Well, firstly, I think you've got to say, what's your thoughts on the government? Should the government be funding nuclear power or
You think
renewables?
it should be private?
I said, look, the government's there to regulate. People have forgotten that. So they should say, look, anyone can develop any form of power that they want to that's acceptable and not harmful. But they've got to fund it themselves and leave it to industry to make the decisions. We don't have to listen to Alba say, nuclear power is the cheapest form of energy. It's the cheapest form of energy. Why do they keep telling you it's the cheapest form of energy if it is? Who cares what a bureaucrat that's never had a job thinks, really, Why don't they let the money and the investment go and have what we call freedom of choice? In this country, we used to have about 35% of the capital available in Australia in the public sector. Today it's 60%. So that means that the productive area that produces real wealth is now diminished to 40%. And, we used to have I think it was 7 or 8 refineries. Now we've got 2 that are very, very low grade. We don't drill for oil anymore. We can't explore for oil. It's illegal in this country.
We can't drill for oil.
No, we can't. And fracking's illegal. So we have to import all of our oil that we need that is refined from Singapore. We've got enough energy in this country for about 60 days. If some other country, China, for example, put a nuclear submarine between Singapore and Australia, in 60 days, you're out of fuel, mate.
What about Dutton's idea to have a gas reserve in WA?
Well, having a gas reserve doesn't run your motor vehicle, right? It's a good idea if you're going to have a wok and cook a bit of cooking. Gas is particularly good cooking Chinese food. But I like Australian. I love pies. I love sausage rolls. I couldn't see how gas could help me too much in that. But it's a story.
Does it put you in the tricky position when you do so much work with China, but you're also saying we should double the cost for universities?
Well, it would if they won't like it. But the point about I'm an Australian first, I care about this country. Sue Ellen cares about this country, Are we got to realise that these guys are all idiots that are in there? You've interviewed them, you've seen them fumble and say, yes, well, I can't answer that question. I'll answer the next one next week. Or, well, yes, I'll have to get advice on that. And I act on advice. Well, if you have to act on advice, why the hell elect you? If you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't got a policy, if you haven't got a solution, I've given you a solution to the debt. I've given you a solution to housing crisis. I've showed you how we can regenerate our economy with $5 billion, right? I said our priorities are wrong. We should care that our people can't feed themselves. We should care that our students and younger people can't have the future they should have. We should care that people under 40 are burdened by debt so they can't borrow houses. They should be our concerns. And we should care that we have an active, strong economy that can continue to fund our hospitals and our schools and our roads. They're things that should matter to us, not whether we have renewable, because we shouldn't even decide. It's not the government's position to tell the market what's the best energy.
So you reckon even renewables should be privatised?
It should all be privatised. As I said, $39 billion in subsidies to renewables. That's a lot of money, feed a lot of people, create a lot of opportunities. $642 billion in the future to get to net zero. And that's all the money that should go into our people to make their lives better. And when you turn it on, at the moment there are 12 coal-fired power stations in Queensland. They provide all the power in Queensland. They've got their own independent network. They don't need that investment, So we're just going to turn them off, bulldoze them, and then we take all that money to keep everyone poor. And why do we do that? So we can control people. Albo's offered in housing to let the government own half your house. That means we can.
What do you think of the housing policy where Labor's saying that they're going to have a 5% deposit but have equity in the home and build 100,000 homes to sell to first home buyers? But then Liberals are saying we're going to make the interest tax deductible, and then they're going to make the interest tax deductible, and then they're going to allow the usage of super to put a deposit down. Do you think those are good? What would you do differently? Well,
first of all, you're going to say, how many people are in this country? 26 million. If they could build 100,000 homes, do you think it would make any difference? I don't think so, right? And they'd probably sell them at a very high price anyway, right? They've got a housing policy at the moment where they're going to build a lot of houses. The last 3 years, they announced at the last election, you know how many houses they've built? 0. No houses at all have been built.
Is that right? No houses?
No, 0 houses have been built.
Any apartments or nothing?
You're talking to someone who was the official spokesman for the National Party, who was a life member of the Liberal Party, was a life member of the National Party for 40 years, right?
Weren't you the biggest donor to the
Liberal
Liberal
Party? I was the biggest donor as well. I got all that stuff going. But the point about it is, it's all bullshit. If you look at what the people tell you at the election campaign, they never do anything. They just say, that sounds good. They talk in platitudes. They don't sort something. I've just said we're going to forgive student loans. I've just said that we're going to double the fees for foreign students to make them come out here, right? So we're going to build fast railways, do it straight away. And we're going to open up land. We're going to have 3% housing loans like they did in the United States. I've said that people are going to have access to their own super, so they're no longer prisoners in their own country. Now, they're all things we'll do in the first couple of days, And of course, if we look in the United States, what's happened with Donald Trump, in Doge, there's been $5 trillion of waste. $5 trillion. Don't think it's not happening here.
It's been quite cool to watch, actually, seeing billions spent here and there. And
we don't want anyone to lose their job.
It's interesting,
But it's not just about jobs. It's about grants and appointments and paying money to the consultants. It's about lobbyists. You had a Liberal minister who gave the Port of Darwin to the Chinese and then became the chairman of the Chinese company that got it. I mean, no one tells you that. and he was on a salary of $1 million a year. Seems like a pretty good bill. You give me your port, I'll make you the chairman. Here's $1 billion. He can sue me for that. He knows what my lawyers are, but he knows it's all true, right? And you don't know. They say, how did it happen that the Chinese got hold of our ports? Do you think they might want to invade you? Imagine if there's people with 1.6 billion people up there who are controlling world manufacturing and don't have any iron ore, don't have any of the resources that we have in Australia, and we're down here with 26 million. Would you send your warships to circle the country? Would you check whether the communications were the United States? Would you build your own port at Cape Preston, which they have? Would you build your own aircraft where you could land your jet fighters?
So what do we do? How do we kind of protect ourselves but also capitalise?
Well, first of all, we realise that we do need the United States on a defence budget as part of the budget. We don't make fun of them, right? And you can look what they've done to Donald Trump. Our ambassador to Washington has called him a village idiot. Our Prime Minister said he scares the shit out of him, right? And I don't mean to say shit, but he does. I'm quoting him. That's what he actually said. He scares the shit out of me. And then when Donald Trump's son wants to come to visit our country, we stuff him up so he doesn't get a visa to visit here last year. I mean, and then they say, you should be really friendly. We're really good friends here in Australia. We love Americans. Of course we do, right? And then we ban their beef. They tell you a lot of crap that it's biosecurity. What a lot of rubbish. They had mad cow disease 26 years ago. They eradicated it in 1 year. They didn't export for 10 years. And they've been, and everyone knows they've had nothing over a quarter of a century ago. But no, we're going to put our biosecurity laws up. You can't come into our country, but our beef's got to get access to your 350 million people. That we've got to get priority access and no tariffs on us just because we're doing that. But why are they doing tariffs? If you look at the debate in the US Senate, they say that at Tomago in New South Wales, they buy all their energy is subsidised by the New South Wales government. So energy prices are higher in New South Wales. Why?
My energy price personally is double, and so is my mum's.
One of the reasons is you're paying the energy for Tomago smelter, And one of the reasons they got sanctions is because the Americans don't like it, because they're not paying the energy for their smelters, So we used to have a saying in Australia. It's a dying saying, but it was called a fair go. We want to get fair go.
I like saying have a crack.
Yeah, have a crack, have a fair go. Have a fair go. So, we should understand that they're helping us. They're pointing out these inequities in our own society.
This is the US?
The US, because they're saying that Tomago shouldn't be subsidised by the New South Wales government. And consequently, who's subsidising? Not the government, but you. Taxpayers.
And you, I assume you pay a lot of tax as well.
I pay most tax in Australia for an individual.
Do you?
I do. But the point about that is I pay my tax because I've got a full committee of people from the ATO which are employed. I hope that's good for their families.
So the ATO, you've got people that work for you.
No. The ATO have set aside a group of people just to look at my tax every year. They're wonderful people.
You got your own ATO team. Do you know them personally?
Yeah, well, it's easy. So let's say you make $500 million for the year, right? And you're a company. So you pass a resolution to pay 30% tax, 150. So sometimes that does pinch the budget, means you've got to live on 350 million for the year. But we can do it, right? So it's really irrelevant, right? All you need in life to be happy is three things. Firstly, someone that loves you, right? Secondly, be able to feed yourself and a nice warm bed at night. And the rest of it's illusion. It's like playing golf. But thirdly, you can't go against what you believe in your integrity or your honesty. And that's what we're faced with in politics, a cesspool of dishonesty and destruction. And that's why we're standing Trumpet of Patriots. That's why we're spending $80, $100 million to finally tell Australians the truth and to provide them with solutions. Not problems, but solutions. We know what our problems are. What we need is our solutions, don't we?
Are you spending $100 million on the Trumpets of Patriots
party?
Well,
we probably will be around that money. It's probably about 60 or 70 million now. And we're doing that because we think it's worthwhile. It's worth having a alternative. You can't have a democracy when it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, when the result's already determined, And you've only got to look at those guys. They're as boring as batshit.
So what about from a business perspective? Like you're running a political party, you got mining operations, you got resorts that are beautiful. How do you spend your time most wisely? How do you know where to invest it?
Well, this country's been good to me, right? And I've got more than I need, right? So, if you're trying to get over these large obstacles in society, right? it does take a bit of money. Like Tucker Carlson was out here with me touring recently.
Is he a friend of yours, Tucker?
He is, he's a friend of mine. Yeah. And Tucker was out here. We toured all around here. We got about 10,000 people when we came out, And Tucker gave a big clip saying that we need billionaires on your side. Elon Musk we're doing that with Trump, that we need to be able to point out these inequities because we're not bureaucrats. Why is the Liberal and Labor policies the same? Because they don't have any policies. They get them from the bureaucrats, the public servants. And what's in their interest to make the public service bigger and inefficient? Look at immigration. 1 million immigrants last year. They say there wasn't. There was only 565,000 is the net immigration rate. But what does that mean? That means that, 350,000 or so Australians went overseas. They're still Australian citizens during the year. Some of them are going, younger people going to Europe for a couple of years, looking around the world. So they take them off our immigration. Say, no, it's only 565,000.
The moving around numbers.
Yeah, but that's bullshit. It's 1 million people that are coming here seeking citizenship and to be here. And what's the effect of that? More competition for our houses. And what they've done, of course, is interest rates have gone up. Australians have lost their homes and gone to live in their cars. These people, the new people that came in, have moved into their houses and they're out forever. There's more congestion on our roads, less of service in our hospitals. We should have immigration in Australia, but only that we can absorb and support. And Sue Ellen yesterday made a great announcement, a very courageous announcement. What did you tell them about immigration? What should we do with it?
Cut it by 80%.
80% immigration cut?
Cut it by 80%. Absolutely. We've got to wind it right back because the Labor Party brought in 200,000 people in the month of February.
Well, they issued 200,000 visas in February. 200,000. Do you think that's good? Vote again for Labor. Vote again, if you're happy.
And immigration is for lazy politicians because it's a sugar hit to the economy. Okay, what they should be doing is making robust decisions to stimulate our economy, to create prosperity, to give people hope. Yeah. But people don't have hope. Looking at B1 and B2, our country desperately deserves a new political party that will put Australians first. And that's us. Yeah. And that's made possible because of this man.
And how is Trumpet of Patriots different to the United Australia Party?
Well, first of all, we're looking at some of the common sense solutions that's emerged in the United States. I mean, it doesn't matter what political party you are. You don't think Australian children should go to bed hungry, even if they're Green supporters or their parents are Greens or anyone. We don't want that to happen to Australians, right? They shouldn't have to lose their home. That's one of the real things that we really worry about. But let me explain a much more serious problem to you. You'll read all of the propaganda in the last 22 years while you were growing up, how Australia's got the unprecedented growth rate in this country, how every year we're not in recession, we go forward all the time. That's the propaganda. It's just not true. When I explained to you before about how much capital's in the country, we explained there's a private sector that creates wealth and there's a public sector. And what's happened, of course, is the public sector's got bigger and bigger and we've got less and less wealth. So if you're going to create growth, it should be out of that private sector of Australians that are already here. But all the growth every year we have is from bringing people from overseas. They're bringing their wealth to our country. We're not generating it here. We don't process our minerals. We don't have our projects. We close them all down. But the bureaucrats can say, oh, well, the numbers show we're going up. But the numbers also show that Australians are getting hungry. They're also showing that Australians are losing their homes, the ones that were here. And then they tell us that we've got to be welcome to our own country. And why would they tell you you've got to be welcome to your own country? Because they want you to believe it's not your country. They don't believe that's what they're trying to get through subliminally to you. Well, welcome to your own country. Now, I admire every ethnic group in this country, but there's so many people that have contributed to Australia being what it is today. There's the Italian community, the German community, people from Europe, people from Asia that make us such a great country, not just one segment of it. And I served as the chairman of the World Leadership Alliance with Club Madrid during the early 2000s. That was the largest organisation of world leaders in the world. We had Nelson Mandela, Gorbachev, we had Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton. He was my chairman. I was the World Secretary General, right? And when I sat across the table with Nelson Mandela, he said the worst thing about life is segregation, what they had in South Africa, apartheid, separate development. And he said the same was true with Martin Luther King, who inspired him to have integration. And Martin Luther King, that he said he had a dream. And his dream was that one day the little white boys and black girls would walk together hand in hand across the plains of Georgia. He didn't say we wanted separate development. He didn't say this wasn't a country for everybody. So both Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King had a dream that there'd be no racism. And what our government's doing is creating racism. It's creating resentment to some of our best Australians because it's creating hate in our community and dividing us and saying this is not my country. But I'm telling you, the people listening to it is their country. It is their lives. This is what they've given. This is what the Anzacs have fought for. This is what so many generations have fought for. And we should love this country because it's the best country in the world. And we've got to do anything. There's nothing that any Australian shouldn't do to protect and defend this country and to know how good it is and how good it's been to him. So there's no task too much for me, for Sue Allen, from anyone to make sure that we raise the flag of freedom.
Because I love this country. Like, I've been representing it as an Olympic athlete for a long time, and I'm proud to be an Australian.
I can't understand why you haven't been diving in the female division, right? That seems to be the easiest way to get a gold medal these days, is to move over in the females division. I mean, I was interviewed on one of those breakfast programs.
I haven't considered it.
Yeah, well, there's nearly 39 genders now, and the 17th gender, I think it's the 17th gender is what is it? Mayonnaise, right? So if you feel like you're mayonnaise. So there was a couple of people who were furries. Do you know what furries are?
Yeah, I had one come after me recently.
Did you?
About me interview with...
Yeah. Well, anyway, these people were furries from England. They went across to Russia and they got cosmetic surgery and they came back with all fur on their face looking like cats, right? And as they went to go through immigration, they wouldn't let them in because they didn't look the same as their passport. So that's what happened. They've been locked out of the UK forever. But it's just ridiculous. You don't need men belting women in boxing, right? And recently the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom has found that to be a woman is a woman. A transgender man is not a woman, right? And, there are only two genders. I know that's controversial for the government of Victoria and the government of New South Wales. They can't think, well, that's terrible. We'll put you in jail for 5 years if you say that. But I'm saying it in Queensland.
People have been jailed for things they've said on social media. And one of the laws that concerned me was this new misinformation, disinformation laws. And I spoke to...
Well, that was Pauline Hanson. Of course, she didn't stand up and vote against it.
Well, that one,
and if you take
jail,
one nation means no nation, because she's giving her preferences straight to Peter Dutton. And she's sold out the freedom community.
What do you think of that misinformation bill?
I think it's shocking. It's misinformation itself, but we've got freedom in this country. The High Court of Australia has said that it's an implied right of political free speech, and we have to defend it.
For free speech,
and I'll be challenging it.
Have to say what they want.
I'll be challenging it next year. That in the High Court, I'll be challenging that legislation, right? Because we did set against it, right? But it's just terrible what's going on, and we've just got to shake up these guys, and not everybody knows how to shake up the party. But I do, because I've been in the party for a long time. I've been behind the doors when the people have talked about, he's a dangerous guy, we've got to watch him, what he says could be, terrible. And that's what the Liberal Party and the Labor Party are saying, How do we control the youth of Australia? How do we keep them accepting the status quo? Which really means, how do we take away their opportunity? How do we take away their opportunity to growth? How do we dumb those people down and make them dumber and dumber?
So you're saying the bigger the government grows, the smaller the private sector, and then the private sector generates most of the income, so it's going to leave most people poor?
Yeah, then we go downstairs and then let's look at another thing. Let's look at the Labor Party. They're all about wages growth. Great wages have not grown for 15 years. And now you've got Albanese and wages are growing. Well, what's happening? The dollar is declining, right? Now, I want all Australians to have the higher wages than they've got today. And the only way they're going to get that and be sustainable is by productivity and new industries and moving the balance of our funds from the public sector to the private sector. That $5 trillion, that some of it goes offshore, could be generated in the private sector in this country and create futures for those people. But they don't have to worry about the government because we're going to have growth. We'll just let another 1 million migrants in next year. And the following year, it just keeps going up. We let in 1.2, 1.3, 1.42 million miles. And one day you wake up and say, this is not my country. And I'm not going to be welcome to it anymore. That's what I've been conditioned. Yeah, I know it's not my country because I've been welcome to it a lot. Yeah, that's fair, isn't it? But I think this is my country. I'm a crazy guy. Yeah. I think Australia is what we stand for.
We also believe that everyone is equal under the Southern Cross. We've got one flag and we've got one nation. and we are all equal under the Southern Cross. That's what you diminish the importance of our Australian cultural heritage, whatever that culture may be, and especially for First Nations people, you diminish the significance of that welcome to country if you say it every 5 minutes.
Yeah, and there's so many good Indigenous Australians that are not being appreciated. Jacinta Price is one of them. And she said, "We're going to make Australia great." And that was so insightful. And she said it next to Peter Dutton.
And she was attacked for it by the Labor Party.
And she was pulled aside by the Liberals and don't say Australia's great. Australia can never be great,
Yeah. You must be ashamed of yourself for loving your country, Jacinta.
Yeah.
The other thing
But it's not about loving your country. It's about just wanting what's best and a fair go for our people. It's, people when we had the vaccine crisis and I went out against the vaccines, I spent $100 million at the last election and everyone said, "You only got one senator." Well, there are 26 million Australians, only 18 million of them got the vaccine. There's 7 million people that didn't get the vaccine, right? And, that's a pretty good investment, about $20 a person. And now everyone knows the vaccine causes you problems. And all the doctors are frightened to admit it. Just people are dying here and there. Other people are getting very fast cancers, There's a whole range of things that are happening that they won't tell you. In the United States, they've had trials that show that, at Pfizer knew that 48% of women aborted when they had the vaccine. That's all out, and, we had...
That was a crazy time, COVID.
Well, it was. Well, in Queensland, we had mandatory...
Did you have a near-death experience on that?
I'll tell you about my near-death
Did that
experience.
change your perspective on life, Clive?
Well, it does, because you think you've got to make good use of the time you've got. That's why I'm coming on this podcast. But the other point about...
Best use of your time.
Yeah, that's right. But the other point about... What was I going back to talk to you about?
near-death experience.
No, it was before my near-death experience.
We'll get to it because I want to talk about it.
I'll tell you about near-death experience. I mean, that's a really good story, but it's really true, But anyway, we had 1,000 policemen and nearly 1,000 AMBO workers who refused to take the vaccine in Queensland, and they were dismissed, lost their jobs. Some of them had been detectives for 15 years, and of course, the ambulance service went down when they lost all those people, and they had all sorts of problems, by losing their income and losing their livelihood, because they didn't think that something that wasn't tested should be pumped in their body. Now, if you took tomato sauce and you put it in a vaccine, it'd have the same sort of testing. You wouldn't do that, would you? But that's what it was like. And because I'm Clive Palmer and I can have a negative impact on certain things, people hate me.
Why is that? Why do people hate you?
Because I tell the truth, right? And a lot of people have got a vested interest in not telling the truth, right? And what happened was that I funded a whole team to challenge the mandates for ambulance workers and police, and we won. And in a historic a judgment by the Supreme Court of Queensland, they found out that the mandates were unlawful and that these 2,000 people are entitled to damages.
Did they get damages?
We're in the middle of damages at the moment. I'm supporting them that. Then they unveiled after they won that Clive Palmer had funded the whole thing, right? And then the state of Queensland never appealed against it. So this is it's the end of the road. It's definitive proof that the vaccines were unlawful.
But we've got the evil government in Victoria who are still pursuing Victorian firefighters and saying that it's still driving the mandates for these Victorian firefighters. So they've been stood down, and they'll be going to an independent arbitration, I think, next month.
But nothing's independent. If you're in government, when I was in government, we say, let's have a committee. But do we know the answer? Yeah, if we know the answer, we'll have a committee. All these government inquiries, judicial committees don't look at anything. They're given the answer before the government appoints them. They're there to justify what the policy is. You don't get independence by having someone appoint you. And if you're a judge, you're looking to have a future after you retire as a judge, you want to chair a committee. Who's going to chair the committee? Well, the government's going to be your boss. They're going to appoint you to chair a committee. So any of your judgments are going to be a little bit in favour of the government if it comes in conflict. But of course, everyone says a court order is important. Well, the average Australian earns $80,000 a year, maybe $100,000 a year. 2 days in court is what they can afford for the whole yearly salary. That's it. It's only for billionaires like me can go in court and give them a hard time.
So it sounds like you go to court a lot fighting business challenges or legal issues. Are you always in court? Like, what always brings you to court, and how do you deal with it? Like, do you enjoy it? Does it stress you out?
Well,
it's a different world.
President Roosevelt said in 1933 that we have nothing to fear but fear alone. Right? So if you want to limit your life and what you're doing and be nothing, you'll be frightened all the time of what happens to you. Right? I don't fear anything. I'm here on this earth, and while I'm here on this earth, I'll be a free person. I'd much rather be dead in my grave than not be free as a human. I think that's something that we learned from the American Revolution. There are people that have said those things and done those things, but we've got to appreciate all of the people that fought for our country in the Second World War and went up to New Guinea. One of my uncles was on the Kokoda Trail and got wounded, and I've lost people in the First and Second World War. They've done more for Australia than I could ever do. It's not that we want to glorify war, but we want to glorify public service. And you don't have to be Prime Minister to be in public service. You can be in a local Rotary Club, you can be a Boy Scout, you can be a guide, you can help poor people that are hungry. You can do all sorts of things. Public service is a great opportunity for everybody. And we have to do it because we're all part of our country. We all believe in this country. And that's the most important thing about it. And I don't back down to an Albanese or a bloody Dutton or someone like that.
You just take on the government.
Yeah, wouldn't I be a weak guy if I trembled when a policeman came in the room with a bald head, wouldn't I? I'd be a pretty weak guy. And I was frightened of a man that was brought up by his mother falling through her bum every way going down the stairs because she lived in Balmain and she had arthritis. I feel sorry for him, but that's not a reason why he should be my Prime Minister.
So fighting things in court,
Yeah.
like, do you have just lawyers on retainers that just have new
Yeah, we have
projects come in?
about,
Like, how often does a legal issue come in?
Well, I suppose we've got 20 lawyers in our group full time, and
Do you should have your own
and
client.
and
law
we've
firm.
got a lot of people. Look, if you look at BHP or Rio, they have just as many in what they're doing in commercial stuff. It's just that I've had a lot of experience, and I know that they can't bluff us. That we know what the law is. See, the law can be there and you can say it's protecting you and all this sort of stuff, but if you haven't got the money to enforce it, you're defenceless. And most of my people that I love and care about in Australia don't have that money. And money is a pointless thing for you. As I said, what you need to be happy is a bed, a woman that loves you in my case, and a warm meal. Just get realistic. Let's just say that's my parameter of my ambition. If I've got that,
You're okay.
I'm okay as a human being. Let's start relating then and say, well, what is important? If you go too far the other way, people are not important to you anymore. They don't matter. They just become numbers like they did in Pfizer. They'd kill you for $20, right? So that's what you're up against. You're up against absolute evil, or you've got to raise the flag of freedom, truth, and justice.
So what about from a business perspective? Like, you've gone from millions to tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then billions, possibly tens of billions. What changed in terms of your problem solving or strategy to get there?
Well, I think numbers for me is like goals kicking the football or playing rugby league, how many tries you can get. That's what it is for how I think. And
like a sport?
And I am highly skilled at making money. Whether I mean to or not, I just seem to make more and more money. But the point about that is that's not a bad thing, because it allows me to do other things for other people. Like the West Australian government was so upset about me, they passed laws trying to take all my assets. I don't know if you realise that. That was back in 2020. They sort of tried to take everything I had in Western Australia because they didn't like me. It was a political thing, right? And the company that they attacked, Mineralogy, was owned by a Singaporean company that I'd set up years ago, right? And they didn't realise it was covered by the Australian Free Trade Agreement, right? So now the Australian government is in international arbitration with me under the treaty, and it looks like I think we'll be awarded over $200 billion, all right? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of damage they did to me. But if I get that money, I can spend it better than they can on the people of Australia. It'll make no difference to my lifestyle.
Did you always know you were good at making money? When did you realise that?
Well, it wasn't actually being good at making money. It's good at making decisions that makes money.
What about that decision process then? Like, how do you think about it?
Well, the first thing I did was make a decision, right? So there are so many people that are frightened of being wrong, right? I've been wrong more times than I've been right, but I'm not frightened about making a decision, because if you make a wrong decision, it'll lead you to the right decision eventually. If you make no decision at all, you'll be nothing. You meet a lot of people that say, well, I didn't do senior, I haven't done university, I'm going back, I'm going to do a commerce degree. But 5 years later, they're 5 years older, and being a commerce graduate at 30 is not as good as it was at 22. And you won't get the same feeling. So whatever age you are at life, you've got to address the world as it is around you, I've found. And you've got to make those hard decisions. It was a hard decision to come here on this podcast. I said, gee, I've never done a podcast before. what will he be like? He might be mean and nasty. He could be a red communist. He could be a greenie. He might say that I'm a rat, a dog, a pig, or anything like that. Can I take that? Will I accept that? I said, yeah, because I'll bring Sue Ellen with me and she'll protect
She'll protect
me.
you.
She'll protect me.
Okay, you're just overseeing me, overseeing Clive. Okay, just making sure.
I'll just tell you that Sue Ellen is brilliant. She's one of the most brilliant people I've met in the world. She's got a great disposition and she's a real Australian. And her messages have really cut through in this campaign. And can I tell you something? Do you want to know a secret, right?
Oh, listen, we do have about 5 rolling mics, so.
Okay, well, this is a secret. I think you'll see in the debates coming up with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition that Sue Ellen will probably make some sort of appearance before they start and before they end, and you'll get our message. The Australian people will get our message, and you'll have a chance to compare her with what the Liberal and Labor Party are pretending is a separate party. I mean, there's been so many members of the coalition appointed as ambassadors under the Labor government. It's unbelievable, And, what is really outstanding for the Labor government and the Uniparty government is that they've brought our cost of living up and our standard of living down consistently for 3 years. Is that enough to wake up the Australian people, to let them know that they have a chance, that there is hope for the future? And that's what we're here to try to do in this country. We've got 100 people standing in the House of Reps. We've got Senate teams in every state. We've got one senator in the Senate already, Senator Babette, that's fought hard. And 3 years ago in the United Australia Party, I said they're going to increase interest rates. The Reserve Government Bank said, no, we're not going to do that. Palmer's a crazy guy. We're not going to do that. And we see interest rates up to 6%. We see Australians losing their homes. And not that we want to be right or wrong about anything, but we don't want that to happen to the people that we care about.
So what about, I've heard a crazy story about how you got a private jet, possibly for free. How did you pull that one off?
A jet?
A jet.
Well, I think we just did some trades, I think, got out of that. But, it was a...
Is that a cool story? Like, that's pretty dope.
That's true, but I haven't told you about my near-death experience.
I want to get to that as well. Should we start with the near-death experience?
Yeah, okay, well...
Did that change your perspective on life?
Well, I'll just tell a little story and lead into that because, I was sitting in having dinner with Matthias Cormann in Perth when the COVID thing had first broken out. And at that time, across the world, everyone recognised that hydroxychloroquine was the best thing to treat COVID and had been treated successfully. Of course, subsequently, Pfizer and Moderna put out a lot of bad information about hydroxychloroquine, but in the countries that used it, like in some states in India, they've got 214 million people and they had 14 deaths and they used hydroxychloroquine. Uttar Pradesh. So, it's been proven now that hydroxychloroquine could have saved many Australian lives. So I sat down with Matthias Cormann and I said, well, why doesn't the government try to buy hydroxychloroquine? At that stage, the US Trump government was out bidding at all the auctions and the government of the United Kingdom had banned the export of it, right? And yet Matthias was saying, well, it's too hard to get it through the bureaucracy and get them to approve these things. But Australians could be dying. So I got my current son-in-law, my future son-in-law, my daughter, and we went around the auctions in the world and bought 33 million doses of hydroxychloroquine and brought it back to Australia with the authority of the Australian government at the time.
Did you just put it on your jet?
I came big. I just did the transfers electronically for the money. It was very easy, really. My daughter and
logistics for someone else.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah,
okay.
But we put it on the government stockpile, and they, what's his name, John Skerritt, the guy that TGA gave us all the authorities, and so we could do that. The government did help, and we put that on the government stockpile. And Professor Selinsky in New York said if we'd given that to people, right, they wouldn't have caught COVID, and we wouldn't have lost nearly 9,000 Australians. But what happened was Moderna and Pfizer came in and they told the government they had to destroy it. So that 37 million tonnes, tens of millions of dollars that I paid was destroyed by the government.
You lost tens of millions from the government because they just destroyed it.
Yeah, actually it gets better than that, right? If you want to hear the story. Because years later, I'd lost that money and there's a section of the Tax Act that says if a citizen spends money in the defence of Australia, it's tax deductible, right? And so in my tax return, I just put it in as a deduction, and they came back and disallowed it, right? Because I didn't think I should, even though the government requested me to do it, right? They didn't think they should give me the deduction.
So you couldn't deduct it?
Well, they say we can't, but we're fighting them in court over that at the moment. But it just shows a meanness of spirit, right? Because I got no benefit out of the money I spent. It was money I spent for the benefit of the Australian people, and it was gone. But it just demonstrates the meanness of spirit of the current government, that they don't really care about you. Anyway, I had double pneumonia. I was down in Sydney on my yacht, right, and I caught COVID. And
On the boat?
On the boat,
So one of the staff must have given it to you?
I think so. But then we went, but I already had double pneumonia, yeah? And then I went back to Queensland. I was in the hospital from the Gold Coast, and 2 doctors approached me. And my oxidation level had gone down to about 89%. And they said, Mr. Palmer, we think you've got 5 hours left to live, right? And we've got to place you on a ventilator to ventilate you. If we don't, you'll die. Now, I knew that people that were put on a ventilator, 70% of them died, right? That was the reality of it. So I didn't want to, and they wanted to give me a Pfizer drug with that, another drug. And again, people that took that drug, went on the ventilator, died. So I said, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that, right? And they said, well, if you don't do it, we're going to have to make you do it. And they all approached me to grab me. And I picked up a chair, and I told them if they did that, I'd run the base of the chair through their throat first, right? And they decided to retreat, right? And I thought it was terrible. Then the cavalry arrived in the form of the media. So they said, Clive's in hospital. You know, what's going on? He might cark it. Let's get the story. And they all came in, about 100 media.
In your hospital room?
In the hospital. Hospital. And there was one security guard who couldn't stop them. And then a nurse ran up to me and she said, they're coming. I could see them in the COVID treatment room coming up the aisle. I thought, gee, they're going to get me. They might eat me. So then the nurse said, I'll take you out somewhere where it's safe. So she took me to this part of the hospital was under construction where no one could find me. And I still thought I only had 5 hours left to live. I thought if I had 5 hours left to live, I wanted to spend it with my wife.
Not hiding from the media in the back room?
I didn't want to do a press release at 5 hours to go. So I, are you all right? He can compose himself.
Oh, that's very funny.
So I dialed my wife, who I love, and I told her what was happening. And she said not to worry, she'd come and get me. And then on the news that night, you know, you could see choppers over the hospital and following my wife's car around to the back of the hospital, right? And where I hopped in the car, and that was covered nationally, and I was going away, I thought to die. But my telephone rang, and it was a doctor from Sydney who was doing a large trial with hydroxychloroquine and Ivermectin, who was having tremendous success. He had 600 in the trial and no one had died, right? And he wanted to help me. And his daughter was on the Gold Coast and she had all the medicine. And within 30 minutes, I was getting large quantities of Ivermectin. Within 2 days, my oxidation had gone back to 97% of my blood and the COVID was gone.
So this worked for you?
It worked immediately, right? And I'm living proof of it. But it doesn't just work for me. If you look at the data internationally, it worked in many countries for many people. But that was banned in Australia, right?
And you think it's because Big Pharma didn't want it?
Of course they did. You know, Pfizer got $70 billion profit for that year. There are over 1,000 people in Pfizer that made $10 million. What do they care if a few Australians or die, or a few Chinese or a few Lebanese or a few Indians or a few, what do they care about those people? They'd rather have their money and their nice big house, you know. But, you know, we've got politicians that are supposed to protect our country and protect our people. And they're the ones that should be accountable.
Did you feel betrayed?
Well, I thought it was bad. You know, it was really bad. You know, it was bad. It was a great evil that we were facing, right? And, you know, Scott Morrison and is responsible for a lot of those deaths. There's no doubt about that. Sue me, Scott. I'm happy to go to court and show you how you're responsible for it.
How many court cases have you got going at the moment? Do you even know?
Well, I don't care. All I care about is, while I'm on this earth, I want to do God's will. All Australians should want to do his work. And that's all that matters. And, you know, that's how I feel.
The statues around here representing that are beautiful, by the way.
They are. But it's not that I'm overly religious, but I'm just saying that, you know, it's a good way to live. And what's the most important thing in life really is to be content with your own life, what you've done. When you finally lay down to die, you don't want to say, well, I should have done that. You know, I should have said this. Why did I waste my life? Why did I go along? In my case, I won't say that.
Because when you thought you may die then and there, what did you think?
Well, I thought about talking to my wife, who I loved, who I cared about, to let her know how much she meant to me and how appreciative I was that she had taken her time on the life she had on this planet to spend it with me. And that I hope that I could do the same thing with her. But that's really important, I think, you know. It's important to care about people.
People are the most important part of
I think
life.
they're the most important part of people.
I agree
You
entirely.
can talk about money, being billionaires and all that sort of stuff. I've been a millionaire in my life. I've been a billionaire in my life, right? It makes no difference, right? If you really have a strong character, if you really believe in this country and you really respect other people, that'll see you in a much better jet set. The billionaire jet set's not the best to live in, I can tell you that. They're not the nicest people, generally.
Really?
Some of them are okay, but it's probably 1 in about 20. The rest of them are killed people, crawled over people.
You reckon most billionaires are bad?
Well, I think, being a billionaire itself is just having a lot of money. So what's more important is how you got that money. You take someone like Elon Musk, who's got that money because of his brilliance and because of who he has. So he's become a billionaire by virtue of what he's done. I've become a billionaire by virtue of what I've done.
Through mining and real estate.
Many billionaires are billionaires because they were born into it, right?
What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's sad for them because it takes away their opportunity in life.
What about your kids then?
Yeah. Well, my kids are good because, they've all have got no sort of pretension about money being worthwhile. They've all been to normal schools. They've all got normal friends, and
Normal friends.
they're coming tomorrow to the launch, But what you've got to do about it's hard when you have children because at some stage they've got to go. You've got to remember if you've given them the good preparation, it's time to open the cage and let them live their lives, right? And if you're lucky, they'll come back. So far, mine have come back.
Well, they didn't have to scour the globe looking for hydroxychloroquine doses to save Australians. So I think that's a testament for his children in that they are a little bit of a chip off the old block, so to speak.
They enjoy hanging out with you.
Yeah, well, they do, but
It's nice, isn't it?
But they all enjoy a sense of history, They know that their uncles were killed in the Second World War defending this country. They know that they've given more than other people could. They know that some of my nephews that I've had have come back from the Vietnam War as totally incapacitated, that served the country at a time in a war that they shouldn't have been in, but still answered the call for Australia and stood up for the country that we live in. They know that that's real personal sacrifice. And they know that you don't get anywhere. They know I start work at 1 o'clock in the morning and don't finish till about 9 o'clock at night, So it's not like being a billionaire living on your super yacht. I've got a super yacht, but I've got...
Where do you keep it?
It's up at Airlie Beach at the moment, but it's on its way to Vanuatu. But I'll fly over to Vanuatu for the weekend or something on a jet and that sort of thing. But, it's not the end-all, the be-all, It's really, what matters. Being here today with you and being with Sue Ellen Wrightson and talking to the people on this podcast means a lot more.
Than being on the super yacht.
And then being on the super yacht.
I appreciate
It does, yeah. But we'll take you on the super yacht one day.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
I think another way of saying that is that it's incredibly important for us and for us to have a contest of ideas in this country. We really do need a lot of people pitching their ideas to younger Australians because ultimately it's your future that's at stake. It's you guys deciding who you're going to put your faith and trust in. And you know what? You have to give that faith and trust to people that actually care about people,
And I think the big thing is that don't be frightened to be wrong. A lot of, when you're younger, you're self-conscious what other people think of you. And sometimes you say, well, maybe I shouldn't speak up and say what I think. But don't do that.
You have to.
You have to say what you think.
Free speech. And when you're talking about the people going to war...
Because, you might have the wrong idea. Let's say you and I have got different ideas. If you talk to me and we discuss them, at least I can understand from where you're coming from. And that means I'll get to know you more. And I might be able to change your idea even to my idea. Who knows? But if I just sit there saying, I'm too scared because I might be wrong, I'll never open up that flower.
Has there been a time in business where you've made a major mistake and you were wrong?
Yeah,
and you
sure.
had to rebuild? Can you tell me about a story?
Yeah, well, I think... there's been a major mistake. There's nowhere I've made a real major mistake in business, but there's places where I've made wrong decisions or I've done the wrong thing. I remember when I started in real estate, I met my first wife at university when I was about 18, I didn't have much money then. I was living on the floor of one of the student colleges. They used to push me around every night because I couldn't afford to go there. And I thought she was pretty good, and I wanted to invite her out for dinner, Thought I'd have to go and buy a cheap suit or something, and I wanted to get some money. I didn't have much money. So I thought, well, over the holidays, I'll get a job, And I thought, I don't want to work hard. I said,
Really, when you were young?
Yeah, I was about out of school. So I thought, well, I said, what about real estate? Those real estate salesmen, they're a bit of a joke. They don't do much. So I looked at all the real estate jobs. There was one there that paid $200 a week as a salary, and you got a commission. All the rest were commission. I thought, well, I'm never going to sell anything in real estate anyway, right? So I'll never get a commission. So at least if I get the $200 a week, I can take her out a couple of nights, So I went for the $200 a week job, and I dialed it up, and I said, hello, I'd like to come in and get a job. And the guy said, how old are you? I said, I'm 18. He said, no, I'm sorry, we're looking for people over 30. And he just hung up on me. When you're young and restless and a bit irresponsible, right, you'll do irresponsible things. So I rang him back and said, hello, I'm 30 years old and I'm looking for a job in real estate. He said, come straight and see me, man. So I went and saw him, and I got the job, put a bit of grey in the side of my hair. Went in there, sitting down there, got the job. It was very good. And we're all sitting around. We had to go to a training course to tell you how to sell. This company was a specialist company that only sold large banks and large lots of real estate, in like lots of land all over Queensland, and 4 banks. So they had a training course that they thought worked in selling and how you go about selling land. So I went through the training course. Because I never sold land before, I didn't have any knowledge about it, so I just absorbed it all. And I went out and did the. I found everyone else in the training course was experienced, and they said it was all bullshit. But I didn't have anything else, so I went out and did the course, and I came back with 23 sales in the first 2 weeks, and I think I made about $8,000 that month.
Because you listened to what you were taught, and most of the other guys thought they were too smart to listen.
Too smart to doing that. So then I went on, and I think I started in about November, and by the end of February, I'd made $400,000, and I was the top.
At 18?
At 18, I was the top salesman in Australia for that group. They had like 500 or something. I was the top, so my mother and father said to me that I was a disgrace, that I should go back to university and do my arts law degree like everyone else was doing that had been in our set, and that I needed to go back to uni because I hadn't been paying attention to my studies. So I bought a block of flats, and I thought, oh well, it's gone all right, So I make mum and dad happy. So I went into the office and I was going to resign. And that day, the managing director was up from Sydney, and they had a turnover something like about 700 million a year or something, and it was all their land. And he said to me, he said, Clive, you've really done a remarkable job. A remarkable job. Let me see that. You're our number one salesman. It's a really remarkable job. But to be honest with you, we're a bit worried about your age. I said, my age? And then going through my mind, I was thinking, well, I've all the ideas. Well, I made the sales. I did that. I did hard work. I'm entitled to the money. I thought he was going to come down on me like a ton of bricks for being 18. He said, because at 30, you'll be our youngest state manager we've appointed. so they made me the state manager for what I was doing. And all
at
that
18?
At 18, yeah. So,
but we've missed the important part, Clive.
Well,
did you get to take your girlfriend out for dinner?
Yeah, I did. I married her, and I had two wonderful children, and I'm very lucky.
Congratulations.
I did,
it's so funny. I started diving because there was a girl I liked that was doing it. It's a good motivation.
Yeah, well, that's the best motivation when you're 18.
Anyway,
so there's more of the story if you want to hear it.
Yes.
Then the next day, of course, I was a bit stunned. I thought, well, I'll stay for a while, make a few million out of it, because I could have made that. And I did. I made about 40 million. Oh, well, not in that job, but in real estate. I made about 40 million by the time I was 24, but which was a lot of money in those days, not so much now. But anyway, so what I did was I had to go and then face the sales team. I was the new state manager, you see, and they had about 40 guys. Some of them had been selling land for 30, 40 years, are really tough guys, and they all looked at me and all thought that at 30 I shouldn't have had the job. They all should have had the job, sort of thing. So we looked around the room, and part of our system was you could never ring a person on the telephone. You always had to go and see them and their wife together, because that's when you could sign them up. That was just one of the things we did. And all of these guys that had been in other real estate thought, no, you can ring them up. It's crazy, you can ring them up. And they all resented me. And one guy started having a go at me. He says, I've been in real estate for 40 years, he said, and I've forgotten more than you'd ever know. And I said to him, well, I haven't been in real estate too long, but I haven't forgotten anything. His memory must have been going. But anyway, so what happened was they all thought they'd get stuck into me by saying, oh, well, we want to change the rules. We want to be able to ring people and canvass people and not have to go and see them and take our contracts with them to try to sign them up. And I said, Oh, that's a silly thing to do. I said, the reason you want to do that is because you're not competent enough to ring people up. Otherwise, you'd have my job. I said, everyone
Were
knows.
you ringing them?
Yeah, no. So I said, everyone knows I could do it, someone with my ability, but your ability, I don't think you can do that really, And they said, oh, yes, we can, sort of thing, And I said, okay, well, let's have a test. I said, we'll get a yellow pages. I'll bring my secretary in here, and we'll say you pick doctors, barristers, engineers, 3 professions. We'll have the phone book, and then you guys can go out for half an hour, and you can ring all the ones on the phone and see if you've got an appointment. Then when you all fail miserably, you can come back and I can have the next one on any one of the lists. You can watch me ring and I'll get the appointment. Then you'll know that you're not as good as me, and that's why you haven't got that job, right? Then you'll bow down and we'll go out together as a team with one united leader, me, being your leader out of my merit. How does that sound? They go, yeah. That sounds really good, because it's about 50 of them, sort of thing. So they think the odds are with me, the force is with me. So they all go out for a half an hour, they make their phone calls, and sure enough, they come back with no interviews. Because you know that someone rang you up, so they want to sell you land, you say, oh, mate, well, I can't talk to you, and hang up on them. That's what they did. So, but then it was my turn. So they got the next one there. It was a Dr. Wilson. I remember his name. It's etched in my brain. And so I rang him and said, Dr. Wilson's surgery here? I said, yes, can I talk to Dr. Wilson? And they said, is it an emergency? I looked around the room and I said, yes, it's an emergency. Hold the line. And then Dr. Wilson comes, hello, it's Dr. Wilson here. Can I help you in any way? And I said, yes, I'm ringing, but I understand it's an emergency. Well, I think it is, because I know you want to make a lot of money. And one of your colleagues has suggested I give you a call. Really? He said, that is true. I do want to make a lot of money. He said, then you go for an interview. You go for an appointment, knowing you're not going to get it. So I said, well, could I come around tonight at your house at about 7 o'clock and sit down with you and your wife over dinner? Maybe you could invite me for dinner as well, and I could tell you more about it. Oh, I'm very sorry. We've got something arranged tonight. And as soon as he said that, everyone's face smiled right around the room. They were all smiling. I thought, gee. I said, can I tell you a little bit about it now? He said, sure, go ahead. I said, good, I'll be down in 5 minutes. Right. And then the faces dropped, And we went down, I actually saw Dr. Wilson. I went and saw him. And it was against the law, because I saw him without his wife. But nevertheless, I took 50 cents deposit on a block of land off him, made an appointment to take him out the next day at 6 a.m, and we signed him up. And I brought the contract back the next day. And I showed them. I said, there you are. I said, pull yourself together. Give yourself an uppercut, boys. Let's get on with it, right? And that was a good thing. So in going through that experience, though, it was uncertainty. I could have lost, right? It was a challenge, but I wasn't frightened to do it, right? Because I had confidence in my ability. Just like when you climb up in the tower and you look down at the water, and you remember of all the things you used to learn when you were a little kid, and you think, well, can I do it? Will I do it? And sometimes you do it, and it's better than you thought it ever could be, right?
Certainly. Even the day I made the Olympics, I didn't even know that I would, but you just kind of pretend you do until you make it.
Well, it can be self-doubt. Yeah. So you
do it anyway.
As we go back to President Roosevelt in 1933, we have nothing to fear but fear alone.
That's the way you live your whole life. Would that be one of the biggest key factors in success for yourself? Just nearly not being afraid to make a mistake or being wrong?
Well, realizing that everybody will make mistakes in their life, that mistake doesn't become an error until you refuse to correct it, right? So we all make mistakes, but we want to correct our errors when we can, right?
Who do you listen to for that? Or do you know it yourself? Or do you have key people that say, hey, Clive, I think we could do this better? Well,
I guess at my stage of life, I'm 71 now, I listen to myself, because I've had a lot of experience. I've had a lot of interactions, and I haven't got any overriding ambitions, right? Personally, I'm happy with what I've achieved in life. Although I haven't been an Olympic diver, but
we can get you in the pool. I'd love to take you diving. If you'll do it, I'll take you.
Well, actually, I had a niece, right? My first wife unfortunately passed away. I had 2 wonderful children, which I've got them here this weekend, and I was fortunate enough to get married again and have 2 more daughters. And her sister-in-law's got a little girl who's 11, and she was a great gymnast, right? and she went straight into diving from gymnast, like straight
if I
away.
know it.
Yeah. Well, in Queensland, and she was like, she'd never done diving before, but she won the regional
Good on
Gold
her.
Coast
Yeah.
diving championships after 6 weeks, right?
Good on her. Gymnastics and trampolining, they just
It was just
go
like
into diving.
it was just that's what she did, and she was then up there. I think she was in the top 8 within Queensland, but it was only like 3 months, right? But then she didn't like diving anymore, right? So this is a terrible thing that can happen to you as a parent, I just say diving to relate to you, but I know my daughter Emily. My son was born at 24 weeks gestation, and they didn't know whether he was going to live or not. And I was told to stick with my wife because he probably wouldn't make it. But he got through 9 months in hospital, and he had a lot of problems. He couldn't see depth, right? And they said he could never play golf, right? So I knew Charlie Earp, which was Greg Norman's coach. So when he was 10 and 11, 12, I took him out there to learn golf, and he could always get to about number 2 or 3 in his age group. That's sort of where he got to. And we did take him to Las Vegas, where he played Butch Harmon and Tiger Woods, and he won 3 holes against them. But he'd do eagle, birdie, and then 10 because he couldn't see depth. He just couldn't do it. But he had a lot of talent. And my little daughter, Emily, was 8 years old at the time, and she used to watch him train. So she came one out and she said, "Dad, can I do golf?" So I said, "Yeah, okay." So Charlie was showing her Greg Norman's swing at this time, right, and teaching her to do golf, and she did golf for 6 months, and then Royal Queensland Golf Course, and they had the state titles there for under 10s. So she said, "Can I go in it?" I said, "Oh, look, you're 8. What chance have you got?" Right? She said, "Oh no, I want to have a go, Dad." She only played about 4 games of golf, and she won it, right? And then she went in the Australian Championships, and she won that too. And she was picked in the Australian team. She went over to San Diego, and she was the flag bearer for the Australian team at golf. And Jason Day was in the under-18s at that time, right?
Did you go over and watch?
I went over with her, but I was crazy then because I thought, I wasn't supporting her in golf at all. But when she got in the Australian team, yeah, this is great, my daughter, have a look at this sort of thing. So I got 2 pros to go over, and she's only 8, Yeah. They worked the arse off her for about 4 weeks beforehand. I thought, this is the world title, fame, fortune, who knows what, vindication as a parent. I can get all these things, but but I had her training for about 4 hours a day,
Yeah.
And she finished 29th in the world as an 8-year-old, but she had 2 more years in under 10s, right? So she was still pretty good, right? But when she got off the field, she said, "Dad, I'm sick of golf. You've worn me out. I never want to play golf again in my life." She said, "I just fed up with it. It's a stupid game."
No diving, no golf.
But she said that to me. So then you're left with a choice. Do you superimpose that you have to do golf because you're only 8, or do you let them not do it? So I said, okay, that's fine. You don't have to do golf, sort of thing. She didn't do golf. But then years later, when golf was in the Olympics, right? Greg Norman and his wife, which wife did he have at that time? Yvette, what's her name? Chris Evett, right? Yeah. They invited us to the one of the Greg Norman events. I was a director of the Greg Norman Foundation, and they announced the Olympic team. And when she was in under 10s, there was this little girl that used to finish 4th and 5th to Emily. She was nowhere as good as Emily, but she's now the Australian champion picked for the Olympics, right? So Emily's sitting there and she said, "I can beat her," right? I said, "You might have been able to beat her as an 8-year-old, but you can't beat her now because she's been hard at it all the way through, and through her persistence, that she's done it."
It's like that. Like I wasn't the best diver as a kid. In fact, I was not very talented. My technique was terrible, and there were so many people that were better than me that quit.
Yeah,
it was nearly just persistence that got me over the line. There's still a lot more divers that are better than me, and same
that teaches you something. Persistence. So what's persistence really? It's saying, well, it means success isn't the end all and be all because you're experiencing rejection early. You're failing early, but it's the hunger to want to go on and succeed, to reverse that situation and say that I know that deep down in my heart, I can do this and I'm going to stick to it and do that. I want to say to all Australians, deep down in my heart, I know that they can do this so we can get out of recession. We can make sure that our people have homes, that young people have an opportunity to own a home. And we had 95% home ownership in this country where our crime rate was very low. So we're on a precipice now. We don't want to fall off the cliff because what comes next is a very big crime rate. And we go like the
people
United
get
States.
desperate.
So now more than ever, we've got to vote for the Trumpet of Patriots because we care about this country. We care about you, and Sue Ellen has got great integrity, and she's a person for the rest of this century.
Well, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon because persistence in politics will actually pay off eventually.
Persistence is everything.
I think it is, yeah.
And with the private jet, Clive, I heard you got a private jet basically for free. How did you pull that off?
Well, it was just using your best abilities at the right timing. We had certain things that we had, and they wanted to do a deal with us, and I thought, well, I'd have a private jet, but I thought whenever you see someone with a private jet, they're always going broke after they can't afford the jet. I could afford the jet, but I thought I'd just try to see whether I could get one for free. It wasn't for free. It was just
a bit of fun.
It was just a pocket, you know. But
Okay, yeah, why not?
But it's a good one. You know, you can fly anywhere in the world in one stop. It's worth about 120 million, I think, something like that. You know, but coming up here last night, it broke down, so I had to get a commercial this morning.
You had me stressed for a minute.
Yeah.
We got stranded.
So I went.
Was this the jet you knew he got for free, or a different one?
I got this trip from Newcastle. I was in seat number 24, which is the last two seats of the jet, sort of thing, right? We lucky got them. So I had to walk down the aisle of the jet, and everyone was recognising me, saying, "How are you?" And I wasn't in business class; I was right down the back. Right?
Really?
Yeah. And so everyone, was very friendly. We're talking.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
You put him in the middle as well? Or?
No, it was in economy. So I got to the back, and then two of the hostesses came up to me. She said, "Look, Mr. Palmer, we've got 2 seats in business vacant. Do you want to go down to them?" And I looked at all the people in the jet. I said, "No, I think I'll stay here." Because what sort of a bastard would I be walking down getting 2 free seats in business class?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in Parliament years ago, right, we used to get obviously business class seats to go from, say, the Queensland members of Parliament down to Canberra. They'd book them for us. They'd always book one for Bob Catter. You know Bob Catter.
Are you friends with Bob?
Yeah, I know Bob a bit, sort of thing. But anyway, they'd always book. He'd have a business class seat. He's supposed to be that. He'd always come and say, can I change this for an economy seat, preferably the back seat, right?
Bob.
So, Bob, yeah. So he'd get on the plane and he'd have his big hat on so you knew who he was. And then he would slowly walk down, hello, how are you? How are you? So he'd always been an economy because he'd want the people to think he was one of them, you see. So he'd use it politically, right? And years and years earlier that, I was in the National Party and Bob hadn't got into party. He was in Parliament at that stage, but he's in state Parliament. He always had his trademark hat, So I had to go to a charity auction up at Mount Isa, right? And they had a Bob Catter hat for auction. But the auctioneer said, we've got 3 Bob Catter hats because he's donated 3 hats to 3 different charities. So we'll offer them together as one lot, right? And I said, well, fair enough. And then Bob Catter walked in, he had another hat on. So just to make sure they got the real Bob Catter hat, the auctioneer grabbed his hat and said, well, made a lot of 4. So someone bought 4 Bob Catter hats, and it's a sort of bit contradictory because, 3 of them are fakes. So you may have overpaid, but that's what he did. But he's a great guy.
Yeah. So your jet meant to come here broke down, so you had to fly economy to come up today?
But that was all right.
Yeah.
That was good. We I think we're on verge. We had to pay for everything. I wanted chocolate to pay for that.
Oh, that's not too bad. I love a good English breakfast.
No, I had one of the other ones. I'm trying to think what it was. Earl Grey, Earl Grey, something like that. They gave to me. Yeah. But great hostess we had. She was fantastic. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't go in business, and we finally finished and landed. And she was behind me. I said, "Well, why wouldn't you go in business?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you the truth." He said, "If I'd gone in business, I wouldn't have had your service," which is true, because she was lovely and she was
really
good,
nice.
wasn't she?
Yeah. Did you guys fly together down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, up.
Up,
But
down.
she gave me an extra biscuit. I hope this isn't in trouble for that. She gave me an extra biscuit.
They might be listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who knows what happens, right?
So what about being a billionaire and a big businessman? What's a typical issue that you'd have to deal with?
Women. Because everywhere I go...
Is that the toughest issue? Or
Well, everywhere I go, not for my good looks, I get a lot of women that come up to say, would I like to have dinner with them? And I say, because no, I said, I'm busy having dinner with my wife, right? So I suppose that's an issue. Men don't seem to say that to me as much as, but they seem to do that. But there is a sort of, that does happen to you. I'm sure it happens to other people, right? But I don't think it's, as I said, from my personality or my character. I think it's
Not for the humour?
I think they're more interested in my bank balance, right? So these are particularly cold women because they've lost the zest of life. Yeah, that's what I find. But if I said that to you, which I did say to you, my wife's going to kill me. She's saying that to you. But anyway, it'll keep her on her toes.
She does sound wonderful. And if you were 22 again, if you were my age in today's world, what would you do?
I'd have a podcast.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I used to be a good athlete when I was younger.
What sport?
Well, I did athletics. I had one of my records, the Gold Coast, was 52 years. I just broke it, sort of thing. So it was a long-standing record. I won a scholarship. I won a scholarship over to the. I won a scholarship to the University of Cornell University in the States over there. We went over for a trial. I went over with a couple of other Australian athletes, sort of thing, and one of them stayed there. And he got married to a girl from Kentucky. He's got 10 kids now and about 30 grandchildren, and he never came back to Australia.
He's got a good bloodline.
Eh?
He's got a good bloodline.
Well, he
set
must
up.
have. It's an American bloodline now. But so I went over there and I thought I was a good athlete at school and in Australia and all that, but when I went over there, I finished 4th and 5th because you'd be up against Olympic finalists and that. Because in the collegiate sports, where like 15,000, 20,000 people would come and watch and pay and all that sort of stuff. They were different than they are in Australia. So I got lonely. I wasn't anybody any good. I was a big fish in a little tank. I was a little fish. And I don't know. I was a tadpole really. And I thought, well, this is not for me. This is.
You also played rugby league.
Okay.
Yeah, I played rugby.
Would you come diving?
I'd be too scared. I only went on a diving platform, 3rd level platform, when I was in Kuala Lumpur when I was a 9-year-old, and that terrified me.
I've competed in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mightn't be able to get up when I do the bomb. I'm 71. I'm like an old chicken. My flesh would separate from my bones, right? But I remember that when I was 18 and 19, I was a reasonably good football player, and good at that. Yeah. But I had a lot of people that said, "Oh, well, you should concentrate on a sporting career. I should do that." But at that age, I realised, well, it's good what I did when I was at school and in the first year at uni, sort of thing. But that part of my life's changing. I'm going to the next step. So I looked around and I remember I looked at Ron Clark. I was running in like a general sort of fun run. He was in the fun run. And I thought, there's someone that's held like 20 world records. He's never won a medal in an Olympics, right? And he's done all that sort of stuff. So if I could be as good as Ron Clark, I still wouldn't be a medalist. Because it could change. You're putting everything on the black, sort of thing. I thought, well, maybe there's more in life than that. Maybe there's a podcast too. I could do
Sport and a podcast.
Yeah. So as you do your podcast, you say, well, I'm an Olympic diver, sort of thing. So that's good. But the point about it is you've met so many other people and you've seen so many other life stories that you can realise too that life's bigger than just diving. And one of the sad things, a lot of my friends who are very good sportsmen, when they were 30, 32, they gave up football or whatever it was, and they keep reliving that. When they're 30, 40 and 50, they still talk about the good old days when we scored the try against Manly, or we did that back in 1966. It wasn't Bobby Fulton, the great guy. It should have just bred off him as a 5'8" or something. But, far better to accept that life is what it is, and there's good things to do today. Like it's good things that what Sue Ellen's doing, trying to save the country. So you've got to meet the challenge at the time. You know what I mean? So you don't just say, well, I've made it to the Olympics. I'm here now and I've arrived as a human being and live off that for 50 years. Don't waste that life, because that means it's part of your development. That means you've done something and you've really achieved an achievement, and it means you can go on and do further things. Don't think that's the end of the story.
We've got the Olympics in 7 years, in 2032.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I've tried to do, my diving and build things outside, because you never know. And lastly, Clive, you've got Trumpet of Patriots.
Yeah. Well, I haven't got it. I hope this country's got it.
What is your vision for Australia?
Well, I think I'd like a country where young Australians had the opportunities that I've had, that they could afford a house, they could have a family, where they could have love and affection, they could have fellowship with fellow citizens, and they could have good prospects and good employment. And they wouldn't have the pressure on them to be thrown out of their home, or a pressure to feed their children, and that they could be all that they could be. that could achieve all the things that we're all different. We can all achieve different level of things, I'm one of probably 50,000 people in the resource industry that went out exploring for minerals, and I was successful. But at least, I was successful, and that can inspire other people to say there's that opportunity, there's that chance that you can do something like that. So I'd like to see a country like that. I'd like to see where we've got more productive of our capital in productivity. I'd like to see a country where public servants' life were more interesting, where they could contribute more to the country. There wouldn't be one public servant in Australia that he's not as appreciated as much as he should be, that he hasn't got as many opportunities as he should have. And I'd like to see a prosperous Australia that remembers what's gone before it and doesn't accept defeat like we're facing today.
Well, thank you both for your time today, and thank you for coming on. And good luck at the election, Clive.
Yeah, God bless you. See you.
Thank you.